order. I didn't have a gavel, so I did the best I could. Okay, I am going to call the meeting for December 6th, 2001 for the Halifax Elementary School Committee to order at 6:01. Thank you, Area 58, for filming. Every meeting, we start our meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance, so stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. This next portion I'm going to hand over to Attorney Dupre to discuss some of the school committee meeting protocols moving forward.
Yeah, so I can read the protocol that, if acceptable, the school committee can vote. It says that the Halifax Elementary School Committee protocols, which will be in effect until further notice. The Halifax Elementary School Committee will meet in the great room at Halifax Town Hall. Because the meeting is not taking place in the school building, mask wearing will not be required. Halifax Elementary School Committee meetings cannot be held in the selectmen's hearing room because the space does not allow for safe distancing. In the great room, all members of the Halifax Elementary School Committee and administrative team will be spaced equally apart from tables in front of the meeting. No members shall be closer than 6 feet. Citizens who attend the meeting shall be seated in the audience chairs, which are approximately 15 plus feet from the school committee tables and chairs. So those would be the protocols. I would ask that there be a motion from a member of the school committee. So moved.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of adopting these protocols until further notice? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Gordon?
Yes.
Okay.
The second item that I had, I noticed in the agenda there is no language dealing with individuals that might need ADA accommodations for school committee meetings. It's probably something we should have throughout the district. It's on the agenda tonight for Halifax. And this would be the language that would be placed on all future school committee agenda meetings. If you need reasonable accommodations in order to participate in the meeting, contact the ADA coordinator, Ryan Lynch, has his email address and telephone number in advance of the meeting. While the school system will do its best to accommodate you, certain accommodations require the hiring of outside contractors who may not be available if requested immediately before the meeting. So again, I would ask that be adopted in the form of a motion. So moved.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Fred. Would anybody in the audience like to be acknowledged or scheduled to speak at this time, aside from the Halifax Teachers Association?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you said this should go on the agenda. All future
Just come up and speak.
Sure, yeah.
districts. I put that.
Just state your name before you speak, if you don't mind. Thank you.
My name is Sarah Dickey. I
Make it
am
back to it.
here because I have been having difficulty finding postings of these meetings online. I go to the school meeting website, I go to the town webpage. I'm having difficulty finding postings of the meeting, advance of the meeting. I'm having difficulty finding agendas for the meeting, and I'm wondering if there is somewhere I'm not looking, because I'm looking on the town website and I'm looking at the school committee website.
So can I respond, or?
Either Jill or Sean.
Okay. So the open meeting law for Massachusetts requires that we post a meeting posting with the time and location and an agenda at least 48 hours prior to the meeting. Typically, we have an agenda ready maybe 5 or so days before our meeting is posted. We have a rotating 6-week schedule, and I do believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that each of the 4 committees in this district have a calendar posted on the Silver Lake website of our meeting dates. I believe that's correct. So you can find it there. Also, the town website where it says calendar will have a posting. There's actually literally a calendar, and if you search through, you can see where all of our meetings are posted. Every meeting in town, every board that has a meeting. So, yeah, so by law, it has to be up 48 hours prior to our meeting. So it always is. If not, we have to reschedule our meeting. So if you're having trouble prior to that date, typically, like I said, we don't usually have the agenda finalized until, I'd say, a minimum 5 days before our meeting, but you can always reach out to myself as the chair, but it is by law required to be posted both on the town website and on the bulletin board downstairs. So there's a physical paper copy of it downstairs too. Our meeting minutes are also logged.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Will I have an opportunity to speak on something on the agenda, or should I speak to it now?
I prefer you speak to it now.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine, take your time.
There's copies of the agenda.
No, it's public information, so by all means.
Okay. On the agenda tonight, there is sorry.
It's good.
Unfinished business, follow-up letter to Desi, and possible vote. I have a question about the letter that was sent to Desi, and I have a question about whether there will be a survey of stakeholders. Is there a survey that's being planned to go out to families in the community, to families with students in the district about their views on this letter?
Not planned at this time, no.
Okay. And what would have to happen to have that taken under consideration?
What's the protocol? A vote from us? What is the protocol?
I
on
think
that?
you may want to explain why you're requesting the survey, and you would appeal to the school committee to request they consider a survey before sending a letter.
So a letter went from the school committee to the Department of Education, and it was unclear to me reading the letter who the letter was coming from. It looks like it came from the school committee. It wasn't clear that it was from the people that you represent. So I was wondering if had any survey happened prior to the letter going out where you found out people's opinions, people's opinions, or parents' opinions, and was the letter representative of that? Would any future letters be representative of that? So my request to the school committee would be, should a future letter go out, could there be a survey?
I guess that's something we'd have to discuss.
So this goes through the chair. I can't speak to during this.
Well, this is public participation
Yeah, so
generally.
usually, for public participation, the person makes a statement, but it's not usually interactive dialogue. So if the person wanted to have it on the agenda for a future meeting, then there could be a request to have that done. And then the chair of the school committee, along with the superintendent, determine whether it goes on the agenda. And if someone else wanted it on the agenda, it would be by the vote of the school committee.
Okay, so at any time, you can email the chair of the committee, which is myself, and, usually correspondence takes place in that way and not necessarily during this forum. I mean, I hear your point is taken, for sure.
I would like the public to request that that go on an agenda, and I will email you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah. Happy holidays. My name is Tara Snello, a parent of a child at Halifax Elementary School. Admittedly, I'm going to share thoughts in advance of what I think will be discussed later on the agenda, since, as we all know, it is public. If I don't speak now, I don't think there will be an opportunity for proper feedback, since also on the agenda there is a possible vote happening. I'm anticipating you are going to ask DESE to grant local governing bodies and the school committee to determine the right to determine what is best for the school and children as it pertains to COVID-19. What makes you as a committee think that Halifax is so unique that we will be granted different mandates than the rest of the state? What makes you as a committee think now, when more cases at Halifax Elementary School have been confirmed than any other time this year, is it good to ask to lift these mask mandates? That it's a good use of your time to bring this up again. Where is the data that you as a committee collected in advance of asking for this authority? Have you had conversations with the nurse? Have you had conversations with Board of Health? Have you asked the parents? I don't think that answer is yes, because I'm one of them. Have you asked the teachers and administration? You're possibly going all in on something, but I don't see any type of work behind it to prove or validate what you are saying is in fact the stance of the school population, or that you did your homework and researched. The letter that was sent prior to, which was in September, states that you as a committee are best suited to determine what measures to be taken to mitigate COVID-19. How exactly are you equipped to make those decisions? In that September letter, you stated transparency in government, particular to the health of community and children, is crucial for public trust. To date, I haven't seen, excuse me, much transparency on the data, facts, figures, and statements you as a committee have collected in advance of sending another letter that makes me feel confident as a parent that you will make the best decision for our students. There's so many other important issues that can be discussed than this, like the bus teacher or the bus driver shortage. Sometimes it takes my child 45 minutes to get home from school because the poor bus driver has to do two routes for a bus driver. Again, I really appreciate your time and efforts on this committee and for all you do for Halifax Elementary School. My apologies again if you prove me wrong, and later on in the agenda you do present some compelling data and information as it relates to sending a letter to DESE. Thank you so much.
Anyone else? Okay. The Halifax Teachers Association would like to make a statement, so I've placed them on the agenda individually. Hi.
I'm Elizabeth Antone. I'm one of the co-presidents of the HTA. I just wanted to read a statement on behalf of the Halifax Teachers Association. So good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. First and foremost, we are here to express our goal in building a successful and respectful partnership between the Halifax Teachers Association and the Halifax School Committee. Striving towards this goal of a more supportive working relationship between us will bring an increased level of collaboration and mutual respect, which would lead to positive outcomes for all the stakeholders in the Halifax educational community. As the HTA, we'd like to address the public comments made at the Selectmen's meeting that misled.
Excuse me, I have to stop you right there because if you're going to talk about the Selectmen's meeting, you need to be placed on the Selectmen's agenda. This is not a Selectmen's meeting. So if you want to speak to our committee, you can speak to our school committee, but we don't do Selectmen's business. That's a different board.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Can I just ask one question?
I'm sorry?
Can I just ask a question about the statement the teachers wanted to say? I don't know what it was, but I didn't know if it was statements that were made by school committee members at this.
It's irrelevant because it was made, she's referring to a Selectmen's meeting, correct? And statements made by a board member of the Board of Selectmen? Thank you. Okay. All right, next we are acknowledging retirement. So we have two long-standing teachers in our community that are retiring this year. We have Mr. Dre and Mr. Kateser. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank them for their years of service to our community. I know personally 2 of my children had Mr. Kateser, unfortunately did not have Mr. Dre, but they've just done a phenomenal job for our community and our children at Halifax Elementary, and I can't thank them enough for their years of service and dedication to our school and our children. Also, we have our attorney Dupre, who's retiring, and the superintendent gave a beautiful statement to him at the Silver Lake School Committee meeting. I don't know if you have it with you and you want to read it again. If you do.
I appreciate the comment.
Okay, but yes, we do appreciate all the work that you've done for us over the years, and you will be greatly missed, Fred.
And I greatly appreciate the opportunity to work with the Halifax School Committee these many years, and my office will continue to communicate and represent you in the future, and they're looking forward to that.
And we are looking forward to getting to know the rest of your team. I don't know if any of... Very shortly, right?
Very shortly.
This is Fred's last meeting with us. If anyone else in the committee wants to make a statement about any of the teachers retiring or to Fred, you're more than welcome to. You don't have to, you're not obligated, but I just want you to know that you have this opportunity to do that.
I'm new here. Thank you for your patience. We've had a lot of questions in the beginning. It's been a brief but pleasure working with you, and I again appreciate your patience with me.
Well, your patience was required.
Yes.
I'd just like to say thank you to Fred, Mr. Dre, and Mr. Kateser.
I would also like to say thank you to Fred and Mr. Kateser and Mr. Dre. My kids did have Mr. Dre, we didn't have Mr. Kateser, but I've heard, wonderful things about Mr. Kateser, and obviously my daughter that's a sophomore and the one that's in college that had Mr. Dre still talk about him favorably, and they're doing great, and I know he's part of that. So.
Yeah, I just want to thank Fred and also Mr. Dre and Mr. Kateser. Out of all 4 of the Carols, only Ava's the one that had Mr. Kateser, and he was phenomenal. And then Ava and both Ryan had Mr. Dre, and I can tell you he's going to be really missed. Ryan got the short stick of Mr. Dre because of COVID and lost a lot of one-on-one time, but that disco ball and his way of teaching will go down in history. So thank you.
Before we continue, I neglected to mention at the start of the meeting that in addition to being recorded by Area 58, I did receive notification that a member of the public may or may not record portions of our meeting at any time, but I'm obligated to make the committee aware, so I apologize. I neglected to mention that. And I do have a quick question regarding the executive session minutes. Are we holding them or releasing them?
I don't know what they're about, but you generally hold executive.
I don't have them in front of me, otherwise I would have.
But you don't.
Yeah, October 12th. I think they both have
We're holding.
negotiations, so
They both have to be held, okay. So the minutes are circulating for our regular meeting on October 12th. So if I could entertain a motion to approve and release the regular session meetings.
I'll make the motion to approve and release the minutes of October 12th.
Okay. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so I need a motion to approve and hold the executive session minutes, meeting minutes from October 30th and October 12th.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and we already did ADA compliance. Warrants are circulating, they're stacked up right here at my desk. Christine, do you want to speak to this single signature? Okay, thank you.
Does Christine need a mic?
I'll try to yell really loud.
Thank you.
Just so I can mention, so we can bring this into the minutes for the signing of the warrants for tonight's meeting, we do have 8 accounts payable warrants circulating. In addition to that, there are also 2 school lunch warrants. The warrants are totaling $476,072.27. And then for single signature warrants, On November 3rd, 9 warrants totaling $174,093.30 were brought to the Halifax Town Hall for payment processing. Jennifer Carroll, as a single signature person, came in to sign these warrants, and they were released for payment. Thank you.
Thank you. School committee correspondence and reports. I did receive one question being asked regarding Chapter 70 funding, but it should be addressed at the budget portion of our meeting. And I will follow up with that person with an email so they have the information in writing, and in case they are not in attendance. Next, we have unfinished business, so we have a follow-up letter to Desi and a possible vote. So I apologize that this didn't get to most of you until this afternoon because I didn't finish writing it until this afternoon. But has everybody had a chance to see this letter that I wrote to be sent? Did you have a chance to read it, Gordon? I'm happy to read it out loud.
Yes,
So, is there a separate letter, because this one's addressed to the Massachusetts Association of School Committees?
So that was going to be part of the conversation that I was going to have tonight, because my original intent was to follow up the letter with the Board of Education, or DESE. But it was mentioned at our school committee meeting at Silver Lake that perhaps one of the better ways to get their attention is to go through the Mass Association of School Committees. And they're also, their mission is to support bodies such as ours and things that we are trying to get accomplished and maybe aren't having any success at. And so I thought if it was appropriate that we could send this letter to the Mass Association of School Committees and also to the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, the Commissioner, Governor Baker, Senator Brady, and Representative Lenatra. But obviously that's totally open for discussion, and you know, we can send it to wherever the committee chooses or not send it at all. But considering we asked for a response to a letter that we sent in September and we have not gotten one, and it's my understanding that most school committees who have sent a letter have not received a response, and so I thought this might be a more appropriate avenue. And I also wanted to add some concerns that I see for our district moving forward as we keep moving this goalpost. Do you guys have any did you read the letter, Jim?
I did. So the purpose of this letter, just to clarify, is to facilitate a response from those who chose to either ignore it or that they're just not going to respond. But most other school committees who've reached out didn't get a response either. So
To the best of my understanding, I didn't run around the state and ask them all, but I know that there's been multiple school committees who have reached out and none are getting anywhere. And I know that Kingston just sent a letter themselves last week at their school committee meeting, similar to the original one that we had sent in September.
Right.
Also, you know, looking for a response, but like I said, it's once I read the mission statement of the MASC, I thought maybe it would be appropriate to sort of utilize them. I mean, that's what they're there for, is to support us.
And the lot that was in this letter here was also in the original letter, which was simply asking questions. It wasn't,
Yeah, we're seeking information and clarification.
That letter,
Yeah.
which I think gets clouded. That's what that letter was about, to seek information.
Yeah.
It wasn't to ask to dictate anything and us to make decisions.
No.
Okay.
I think anybody who's listened to me over the last year knows I'm the last person to mandate universally anything for anyone.
Correct, and I just want to make sure that, you know, possibly that's clarified, because certainly I wouldn't have voted yes on something that answer, if we can do this, we want to do it now.
Yeah, no, there's, no.
Okay.
I mean, in this, there are extra copies of this letter right here, if anybody wants them. They're public record because they're part of our meeting tonight, so anybody can have access to it at any time. Yeah, by all means.
Yeah, hold on. Hold on. You can't walk up here.
Oh, sorry. That's my fault, sorry. Okay, in the future, I'll put stuff on the table.
I have some comments.
Yeah, please, that's why I brought up the public meeting.
So I do agree that some of the information in the letter needs to be clarified, but I think some of the reasoning as to why is a little bit not transparent. I mean, I agree with a lot of the points of, you know, what's the end game? How do we get back to more normalcy in our schools? But also, at this point with cases rising, I mean, I feel like keeping our kids in school is a top priority. And so far, there's studies that show that masking works. I mean, so I think asking a lot of the questions that are asked in here, like, what are the off-ramps? If we get to 80%, which I'm not sure is even a real discussion at our level right now, because, you know, but then yes, I do wonder about, because I don't think any students should be singled out, you know, so I mean, asking those questions I think is important, but making any statements about masking or not masking or the effectiveness, or, because I feel like our goal is to keep the children in school right now. And so, in my opinion, the moves Desi has made that we all voted unanimously to support have kept our children in school. So
We did not vote to support their restrictions. We voted to follow DESI guidelines. We didn't vote in support of their August mandate change. We did not vote in support of that.
Well, we voted to put in place whatever they decided.
Well, we have to by law.
Right.
Right.
So I'm just saying, sure, we have a lot of questions, but let's not make one-sided, or, you know, let's not appear to be a certain way on any side of the mask issue. I mean, I think these questions that you're asking at the end are important. I absolutely agree with that. Okay. But that's all I want this letter to do. I don't want it to...
So provide some edits.
Okay, happily. Right now? Or,
yeah.
Okay. Well, I would take out the second point of concern, because also the CDC guidelines that were cited, or the CDC notes, are from 2019. So I feel like that's very outdated data. So at that whole paragraph of...
Oh, that was just the web link. If you go on their website now, it has the same information.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I just saw the date. I didn't go to the actual link. But I also feel like that whole paragraph should be taken out. And also because it says maybe, and I mean, to me, this seems like a move to try to get masks removed, as opposed to, can you answer our questions about how we're going to proceed?
Well, that's part of it, yeah.
So I would take out that whole paragraph. And
okay, so if you're gonna make, you have to make a motion.
Okay.
To amend and edit the letter.
Okay. Well, we haven't even decided if we're sending it, right?
Well, that's why we're voting on it tonight.
But also, I also want to bring it, because, I mean, I looked up Halifax vaccination rates today. We're at 67% for everyone eligible in the town. I don't think this letter necessarily represents our population. So I do agree with the points brought up that we should survey our school population on how they feel about these and what do they want us to focus and work on. So, I mean, I'm just saying, like, if we were to, I feel like we're sort of, like, what do we do first? I don't think we should send this as a body without information from the school community.
That, if I may, I agree with you and disagree with you. The resident, community member who had asked about that and a survey, and then asked to have it be put on a future agenda, and I believe she's going to send an email to our chair. I support that. I think that's great. We want to keep in mind that these 5 people were voted by the residents to make decisions in this town. So, I mean, you know, I know families, I've been in touch with many families, those of which who asked me to run for this position, and I know what the majority of those people, how they feel one way or another. So I think a survey is fantastic, but keeping in mind, this is an elected committee, and these people in the community elected these people, 5 people up here.
Well, take a look at the room and how many people are masked, and I think you might see how our community feels about it.
There's a lot of people in this room who don't live in this town.
Okay, but...
And can I say something to that as well? I have family members who believe strongly in masks, family and friends. The people who are in this room, there could be many reasons why. And I thank you all, by the way, on a windy, nasty Monday night for coming here. I didn't want to, I'd rather be at home or be honest, just being honest. But there could be many different reasons. It could have been a group of people who decided a month ago they would be, I don't want to get in, that's not what I'm here to discuss, and respectfully. All right, but I want you to know, I can make a decision. I'm not saying I can't by saying I agree with you and disagree with you. I just wanted to get that point of view out there.
Madam Chair, it's just a point of protocol. Usually you would have a motion on the letter, a second on the letter, and then if someone wanted to make friendly amendments, then you would go on the discussion.
Okay.
If they approved it or not.
Okay. So since we've all had a chance to read the letter, can I entertain a motion to send the letter to the MASC and CC the Mass Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, Commissioner Riley, Governor Baker, Senator Brady, and Representative Lenatra?
Can I ask a
so we
question?
can discuss it.
Sorry. If we say we vote to send a letter, but we can't agree on what goes in the letter.
Then you wouldn't vote to send a letter.
Okay, so we're not
So by
starting.
making a motion and seconding it, we can have the discussion as to whether or not we're going to send it.
One more time? I apologize.
So by making the motion and it being seconded, we can begin to amend or edit the letter and then vote on whether or not we're going to send it and to whom.
That's okay?
I'll move the letter.
I'm sorry?
He made the motion.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay. All right, so now we can have a conversation about amending it or who we're going to send it to.
So do you have a copy of the previous letter with you?
No.
Because I think if you're going to send a letter and you were looking for them to provide information that they use to create their guidelines, then I think in the letter we send out, it should be a formal public records request for that information.
Yeah, I actually had that thought also when I was writing this, and I believe I said something in the end to that effect, which triggered that same thought. The Halifax Elementary School Committee makes this formal information request with the firm position that local governances are the best position to assess and respond to the impacts of COVID-19 and the possible transmission in schools. So, and I did intend to include the original letter with this letter because I believe MASC has not received the original letter.
Well,
but if you would word that differently, by all means.
I think it's going to take time for me to write what I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't think that without deciphering and having what their stated letter to us was in front of me tonight, that I'm going to be able to do.
They didn't send us a letter, that's the whole point. They didn't respond.
No, if I may.
You know what I mean? They never responded to us.
I guess I think I need more time to go through.
Okay.
And try to come up with a more thoroughly request for public records.
Okay.
So that we ask for the information that they use to make the guidelines. Because if they provide us that information, then maybe we can say, well, that makes sense. That's why they decided that, or why they didn't decide that. So I think without having the information, it's tough to judge how they made those guidelines. And if your point is that they didn't have that information, they went on it, then I think that by requesting those records as a public body, you would have a easier time to get those records than if individually we requested that information.
So I guess I have a question for the attorney.
Yeah.
Would we make a formal public records request separate from sending a letter like this?
You could, but, one of the problems associated with that is they can charge you inordinate amounts of money to comply with the public records request. Currently, the Jesse, the MASC, Bessie, They are having routine meetings, and the MESC has representatives on it, which reveal and review certain types of data. And that's why it was suggested at Silver Lake. We worked through the MESC to obtain the information because they'll probably be more responsive to giving you the information that they have. So if you were going to make a request for information, you might want to ask DESE what they have, because as your professional organization, they'll give it to you, and they aren't going to charge you for it. But that's why the letter was going to the MESC rather than DESE and the commissioner, because they aren't responding. They aren't responding to any school committee, to my knowledge, that has sent requests to DESE. They're just ignoring it.
Okay, so,
However, they are holding meetings, so they're ignoring the letter, but they are reviewing the information, the data, to see whether they should make different futuristic determinations. So again, you might be better off just working through the MESC to obtain the data you want and to have them pose the questions to DESE, because it's more likely DESE will respond to them than any individual school.
so what would be the appropriate avenue to do that? Sending a letter like this or sending a formal public records request?
Well, if your primary, it wouldn't even have to be a formal public records request. You could send a letter to the MESC stating throughout that what information do you have, you know, as our professional organization regarding these particular topics. And then the MESC, I assume, is sending that information.
We have field directors of the MASC for our area that are very easy to reach out to, and if the information is being discussed in the meetings and it's public, then it seems like that's something we could definitely research and look into to get the answers to our questions. Plus, I do feel it's important to survey the school population and the town, but for sure the school population.
Yeah. In saying that, I'm not saying you shouldn't send this to the MESC. What I'm saying is, you could also, in a letter to the MESC, say, what information do you have, if any, in your dialogue with the Commonwealth regarding ABCD? And you could, as well, go through the field representative to the MESC, because he meets on their board, and will have direct access to that information, as you've heard at the Silver Lake meeting. From what I gather, they're in an assessment period, they aren't in a decision-making period. So I'm not expecting anything immediately from this.
I'm thinking because I think that the more we stay on them, the more, at least, and this was also brought up in the Silver Lake meeting, is that, okay, yep, they're ignoring our letters, like, you know, a lot of, or whatever, that's irrelevant. But it's almost like just like making sure that they know that we're still here, kind of a situation where it's like, we're not going to go away. This is what we're tasked with doing, and we're going to continue to beat the drum until you start listening or respond or pay attention to us. And it seems to be growing in trend across the state where more school committees are jumping on board and sending more and more letters like this. So
I guess if we were going to send a letter requesting all that information, I'd also be requesting what are they going to do to increase access to all the students that are behind developmentally for the summer, following years. What are they going to do? I think if we're going to send another letter, it should be detailed of these are the things that are important to Halifax. These are the things that are important to our students. Masking is slowing down to administration and teachers.
And the
different
nurse.
Elements, yeah, and the nurse,
Yep.
different elements of development. And I think if you're going to target a letter to MSAC, then that would be what I'd be requesting. Here's the issue with masking. These are the things that are taking place because the students are masked. They're behind in developing. These are the things that are taking place. What solution are you going to provide to us, whether it's programs that you're willing to provide? Is it funding that you're willing to provide? Is it training resources? Is it an interactive summer school program that they're going to design to have online and host for the students of our district and the state? I think if you're going to send another letter to them, you need to ask for the masking issues and the data that they use for that, and then what are they going to do moving forward to combat those issues that have been raised.
And I also think we can't blame everything on the masks. I mean, they missed half of the school year. So to continually focus on this when there's much greater issues at hand, like the delays and the impact on students, where they're saying 50% of our students are doing okay after everything is back in school right now, but 25% of our students, probably in a year or two, will be kind of back to where they are, but we're going to have significant issues with 25% of our student population for a long time, and I don't think it's just about masking. So I feel like we need to kind of take a bigger picture approach as to how we're going to help our students catch up and not just be focused. But I do wonder, like, what are the plans? I mean, what are the plans if you never get to the vaccination steps that they have? But I feel like there's a lot more to this letter than just when are we getting masked off, because there's so many other issues related to the pandemic.
I guess I would move the table this to later.
Okay, do you
I
want
second.
to edit and send it to me so I can put something together, build on this? It's gonna be very lengthy. But I think
I think
you're right, to your point, and I think that that's why we've asked for other items to be placed on the agenda when we are discussing things with our assistant superintendent and superintendent regarding how do we meet some of those gaps educationally and developmentally, and
I think
that-
I would take what they have for input to us on those plans, and if there's shortcomings from what they want to implement, then we, as a school committee, reach out to our elected officials,
MASC.
yeah, the governor and DESE, and say, this is what our administration, our teachers are saying. This is what's going on with our students. We understand that masking has caused this, the pandemic has caused this. What are you going to do to help us have a solution for these issues? I think you need to have that information
Yeah.
before we send this letter.
Okay, I agree. But that's only a part of the puzzle, though. That's only a part of this. I mean, the other part of it is, where's the end? The end is not anywhere in sight. Our district is not going to reach the threshold set arbitrarily. You know, it's never going to end. So I think that's part of the issue too, is they're just like dangling this carrot and there's no finish line.
I would request that you put on the agenda for the next meeting to have our regional MASC field director come in and meet with us. Ask them to come into the meeting and bring up these issues.
Okay, I like that idea.
So you have a motion to take.
Oh, yeah, you're right, it hasn't been seconded.
I seconded it.
Oh, okay.
So what you were just discussing about bringing the other person to the school committee meeting, that could come after your motion to table.
All right, so there's a motion on the floor and a second to table the discussion. Do either of you have strong feelings about that?
I agree. I think that's the right thing to do right now.
Okay. All right, so all those in favor of tabling the letter until we can gather some more detail? Aye. Okay. All right, future agenda items. The MASC rep.
Request that we invite a rep come in and speak with the committee.
Okay, that sounds good. Subcommittees, policy.
I'm sorry, on the future agenda meetings?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Agenda items, I'm sorry. Just to make sure, I want to be clear, the resident or the community member who spoke earlier, what she will do is she'll send you an email, that's the proper channel, and then it...
Yeah, this is for us. This
Oh,
is if a
okay.
member.
I'd like to add it to the agenda to have discuss a survey going out to our school population.
About what?
About these, some of these issues, or, you know, I mean, I spoke, just getting their feeling on, I mean, if we can say, I mean, it's all kind of a, you know, if we get more information and say to people, you know, this is where we need to be. I mean, right now it's 80%, that's what we know, right? To like get masks off, at least vaccinated people, like that's what we know right now. But in the future, like how much of an issue is this? What are your greatest concerns about your child in school right now? And as a school committee, what can we advocate for? Because I mean, I feel like it's, like I said, very mask centric, and I feel like there's a lot more going on than just the masks. And so if everybody, I mean, but I mean, that's, I mean, you guys obviously want to get masks off, which actually I'm pretty sure everyone does.
I don't think that there's anybody up here who has said we want to get masks off.
Okay.
I disagree with that statement.
Okay.
Respectfully.
Okay, no, that's fine. I mean, it's just, I mean, I guess I'm just making intimations from things said in public and whatnot. And
I mean, I'd love all of our kids to be on masks, but that's not my choice as a parent to tell anyone else what to do with their family at all. Like, I stand firmly in parental choice.
Okay, well, but I still would like to survey the school population and try to work on what questions, I mean, we had two people ask, do you know what the will of the school is and the members of our community? And so I'm not 100% sure that we always are representing them. And so I want to make sure that's the case. So there's questions we can ask.
Okay, well, we can put on the agenda a discussion about the potential of sending a survey and what it would entail.
Okay, that would be great, thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Policy did not meet. Negotiations, we have an executive session at the end of this meeting tonight to discuss. PAC?
PAC, very briefly, I do have information from the October 7th meeting. That discussion took place after the opening of that meeting about they needed to elect a chair, vice chair, and secretary that serves every, for the 21-22 school year. Give me a minute. There was a motion and then a second for Ms. Kendra Campbell of, I apologize, Marshfield, to serve as the chair. She was then elected to that position. There was another motion and then seconded for a Ms. Michelle Badger to serve as vice chair of Plymouth. That was voted on, and she's now the vice chair of PAC. And then third, there was a motion and seconded by for an appointment by Mr. Stephen, I hope I pronounced this right, Boyce. He is of Whitman Hanson for secretary. The meeting included consideration of minutes, an auditor's report for 2021. They discussed cumulative surplus, a vote to offer fiscal year 23 retiree health benefits. There was a budget report discussed. Open meeting law was discussed. Ethics review by Board of Secretary Becky Ha. Executive Director's report, Dr. Thomas gave an overview of the school year start. And there was a treasurer's report with the warrants and donations, which there were none. There was a motion and a second to adjourn. That was Pat.
Thank you. PTO.
This Saturday, they will be hosting, it's going to be new, it's not Breakfast with Santa this year because of COVID, but it's going to be as normal as they tried to do it. It's Mingle Jingle, and it's from 9 to 12 at the elementary school. They will be doing pictures with Santa, raffles, there'll be the little gift shop for the kids. But yeah, trying to bring back all the normal things with being able to space everybody out. Advance tickets to get them are this Thursday, and you can buy them also at the door, but they're requesting you probably get them ahead of time. So it's from 9 to 12, and that coincides with the town, with the Christmas.
Is there an electronic means to get advance tickets, or is it like go to, how do you get advance tickets? Just
I believe on their Mingle and Jingle page, they said just to send it into the school.
Okay.
And then just make the check out to HES PTO. That's it.
Oh, thank you.
That's the only thing really going on with you.
Capital budget hasn't met yet. Admin review, no.
January 13th will be our next date.
For admin review?
Yes.
Thank you. And Union 31, we just had that joint meeting with everyone, so. Mr. Beaudry,
Summer, if you
Yes.
would, I did, we have on the agenda
did I skip youth and rec?
for youth and rec.
I did.
I just want to, briefly, I did have an opportunity to speak with Mr. Steele. Mr. Steele, very dedicated, as always.
Oh, he's wonderful.
The basketball program is very strong. They're using our gym now seven days a week for the basketball program, which I think is fantastic. He mentioned that he's working with school administration and the custodial staff to keep that floor in the same condition that it is now. It looks absolutely fantastic. I know I've said that before, but he said that the administration and the custodial are very attentive to that. He wanted to compliment Mr. Baramshin and Mr. Cater for graciously working with the after-school sports programs. He said that we're looking at approximately 25 to 30 kids, I think, is what he mentioned, which I think is fantastic as well. He also complimented the Halifax Elementary teaching staff. He said Mr. Steele's thoughts were these kids are going to these after-school programs for the sports and whatnot, and it's great to have the Halifax Elementary School teachers there. Both the confidence and the comfortable atmosphere. It's not some stranger coming in, and I couldn't agree with them more. So the school staff that are dedicating themselves to the after-school program, I want to thank them as well. STEM game club, art club are still on hold right now as we work out of the COVID season. He said that he was in touch or in contact with Principal Beaudry regarding the possibility of these coming back, but he had no information right now. As of the holidays and lights, all public buildings, they'll be doing outdoor activities, so the gym will not be used as it has been in years past. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I
Don't be
skipped
sorry.
you.
It's okay.
Okay, now, Mr. Beaudry.
All right. Just to go off the after-school program, so before COVID hit, we had our after-school programs that were running pretty well. We had sports, we had STEM, we had game club, we had art. They were all booming and filled to the max. So I think when COVID hit, it did kind of, obviously we couldn't hold those programs, but we're kind of working towards getting those programs filled back up. So we're on it. We're going to make sure we get those activities back on board. So
what are the barriers to getting them back on board, out of curiosity?
it would just be people to run the programs. I think, for various reasons, the people that we had running the program, like Lisa Whitney was running the STEM club, and then it branched out into other teachers that were helping out, And then we had paras that were helping out as well. So I think that's probably the biggest obstacle, but we've
Staffing
been,
the after school?
yeah, and everybody's lives are busy and wild and crazy, so we're confident we can get them back up and running, but we've been talking with Dick Steele to try and make sure we can get those up and running. So, fingers crossed, we'll get those up and running again. I just wanted to kind of reiterate what everyone was saying here with Mr. Dre and Mr. Kateser. I have a lot of emotions about that. I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm jealous almost, you know, that to see those two individuals leave our staff. They're big shoes to fill. They're going right up to the end of, you know, their careers, and they're still going hard, and we appreciate everything that they've done. The culture in the classroom that they've created has been top-notch. Their relationships that they've had with their students and the families has been great, so they definitely will be missed, and they're big shoes to fill. So I don't know if I got a tear in my eye. We also have to fill those positions, you know, Brian and I, which we're in the process of doing that, so they will be missed. Jump in on any of these, Brian. We're sharing the mic here. So this report that we started, actually we haven't met in a while, we met in the beginning of October. We did do a lockdown and an evacuation drill that was successful. We haven't been able to do that in a while. Brian's our go-to man on that in orchestrating the logistics for getting our lockdowns and our evacuations to run smoothly, where we headed over to the town green after that. We had the police and fire involved. The students were great, the staff was fantastic, and we got everyone out of the building and back in less than 25 minutes. So it was pretty impressive to get that many students and staff all kind of corralled and across the street and back over before the traffic gets too bad on 106. Due to that wild storm that we had at the end of October, and unfortunately conferences were canceled, but we made sure that our staff was still, like, in these crazy times, they had to adapt yet again to figure out, instead of doing conferences in person, they ended up scheduling Google Meets by phone. They met in person before school, after school, so it just, well, once again, they kind of had to shift gears and step up and figure out how to do conferences, not on that scheduled day. So we made sure that teachers were doing that. As parents that we've gotten feedback from were appreciative that, you know, the teachers were able to kind of still meet with them and still connect with families about the progress that their students were making. And turkey trot and food drive. Mr. Ruiz, I don't want to steal the thunder here, so I'll do my best. It was nice to kind of get us back. We had to kind of reschedule that day, and we still had a beautiful day. It was sunny, it was a little chilly, but we were able to pull it off once again. And we collected over 2,000 donations that goes to the Helping Hands of Halifax Food Pantry, and over $1,300 in turkey gift cards as well. So it's a huge piece of giving back to the community, and you know, Mr. Ruisi did a wonderful job. It's just a top-notch event for families, and families were invited to attend, and we had a ton of people that showed up for the event, and it was just, again, one of those yearly events that we have that we kind of connect with our families. So, thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. And the PTO helped us out with some hot chocolate. And we had various volunteers that helped, and we can't say enough about the event. So, thank you. Also, around that time, PTO book fair, we were over $13,000 that were raised, and that was a little tricky too, because that's been one of our bigger fundraisers, but we had to shift gears again this year, and most of it had to be virtual because we didn't have conferences where they run in tandem. But pulling in that kind of money was fantastic for just a book fair that we did. So thank you for the PTO. And lastly, just the panorama survey we conducted towards the end of November. That was for grades 3 through 6. That was done online, where it focuses on our relationship and community building goal. And those students, we ask questions about mindsets and their approaches to learning and how they can persevere in the classroom.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Was that done in school? Because I know for the older, okay.
It was done in school, yes.
Thanks, yeah, 'cause- all right, thanks.
I think it's,
So you had high participation then?
we did, but there were definitely opt-outs. I mean,
Okay.
we had a good amount of opt-outs.
Okay.
That was one of the options there. It definitely took more than 25 minutes, right? It took a little bit longer in some of the grades. There were a lot of questions there, but we hope to get that information back and, provide the supports that we can for the students that are in need of it. And K-2, we're doing it a little bit differently. Because of the age level of those individuals, and we're doing it as a teacher perception of the students' social and emotional learning skills. So the teachers are asked to complete a survey that's age appropriate. It's about 10 questions or so. They'll be doing that through the month of December.
Can I ask a question about that? So I noticed on Parent Square that we got the alert for 3 through 12. Have you sent an alert regarding K through 2 yet?
I don't. No, I put it in the Friday note, but I can send specific for
Okay.
K2.
Yeah, just so parents understand, like, what, in case they want to opt their youngster out of
Yeah.
that.
We can do that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Is there a sample, like, of questions and stuff that,
Like you did for 3 I can't talk tonight. 3 to 12 had sample.
Yes, there is a sample. It's 10 questions.
Yeah, I just
Yeah,
think,
you can do
I
that.
apologize if it was already in your Friday note, but maybe just again through Parent Square.
Absolutely.
Because
You can
we
do
don't
that.
get bombarded enough through Parent Square.
And K-2 is the opt-out option? Is that?
Should
Because the 3 to 6 was different because it was the students that were taking it, but this one is different. So parents can still opt out to not have the teacher.
Yeah, evaluate their
Yes.
child's
Got it.
psych.
I'll send that out tomorrow.
Awesome.
Can I ask, I just didn't want to interrupt, your lockdown?
Yes.
So when you have these, was this the first of the year?
No. It was, this one was October.
No, I think he means the first one of the year, the first lockdown of the
Oh,
year.
the first lockdown, yes.
Okay. Do you have meetings before you have this lockdown regarding what's going to happen and discussion?
Meetings with
the
the
school?
police and fire, or the teachers, or,
Okay. Yeah.
okay, what?
Yeah, who do you have meetings with regarding the lockdowns? And are you using the Alice framework for this?
Yes.
Okay, who's introducing the Alice framework to that? Is that somebody in the police department, or is that somebody who's trained within the school?
It's been Brian and I that work with the staff to do that.
So you went through the Alice
Yes.
class and you're certified? So,
Yes.
okay, so is anybody in the police department, is somebody assigned to the school, or?
Officer McIntyre does work with the kindergartners, when she comes in, usually the incoming kindergartners.
Great.
She's our go-to person from the police department that does come down and visit the students.
What about 1 through 6? Is there a separate officer who is Alice trained, is with that program?
It's usually Kane or myself, so if we are. But like I said, Chief Shabs, he's been on, I think, 2+ years now? But I think we've been interrupted with COVID. We did have a few meetings with Chief Shabs to try to get the police more on board to help with the training.
Okay.
So hopefully that can continue.
Okay. And are these scheduled meetings for this, the safety and security of these lockdowns? You have scheduled meetings throughout the year, or is it
No.
once a year? It's not.
No, we just kind of coordinate with the police and fire of when we're going to
That
do
might
it.
be something perhaps to consider, with school safety is very important to the entire community. Maybe having scheduled meetings a number of times during the year, combined with the police and fire department. and maybe even a member of the school committee. Just a thought.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Superintendent?
I'd like to add that every August, and sometimes throughout the year, we meet with all of the police and fire chiefs as a multi-district approach. So at the start of every school year, we review all of our safety protocols with our principals and the fire chief and the police chief as well.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Keegan, do you want me to set something up with the police chief?
Right now? No, I mean, we can discuss.
No, like, for the future, is that?
Possibly, yeah, that'd
Okay.
be great. I would appreciate that. Thank you. If that's all right with you, Madam Chair?
Of course.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, okay, may I just for 1 second? So prior to COVID, myself or whomever the chair is at the time of the committee and one member of the school committee would rotate and meet with Kane and Brian, sometimes the school nurses involved, you know, whatever, just to get a feel for what's going on in the building. And you know, oftentimes some of those conversations are about safety and things of that nature. So when I met with Kane or Mr. Beaudry last week with the school nurse and the Board of Health and one of the selectmen, we had discussed picking that back up again, moving forward.
Great.
So maybe that can be the topic of conversation for the next or future recent upcoming meeting, and it'd be something that you and I could maybe go to together, and then we'll rotate there on out through every school committee member, so everybody has a sense of, plus everybody has a niche, right? So that's your niche, that's your thing. You know, Gordon's thing might be different, Jen's thing might be different, Lauren's thing might be different. So we each bring a different angle to it. You know, we've had past members of the school committee who've been really huge on like building maintenance. So that's been their thing when they went to go and talk. So I'm happy to continue moving that.
Thank you.
Doing that moving forward.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if Jim wanted to give an update at a meeting, we could do an executive session for security.
Safety. Okay.
There's something that comes out.
I didn't hear what he said, I'm sorry. One more
It's
time?
important enough for all of us, if you could do an executive session for safety, security.
Did you hear that?
No.
So certain things aren't discussed in public session, and one of them is safety and security of the building. Like, of course, we wouldn't, we could say, you know,
right.
we have cameras, but we're not going to tell everybody where they are. So things like that
I
are
understand
discussed in executive session. So Gordon was saying that perhaps if we have this meeting, that if there are things that are of concern or things that you would like to point out that we go above and beyond within Halifax in terms of safety and security that you would like to discuss with our committee, just request an executive session for that topic, and we can discuss it at our next meeting.
Okay,
Okay?
okay. So I.
But we can talk about that more.
Okay.
The logistics of it, but just so you know. Sorry, I think we're done chit-chatting now.
I just had the upcoming dates at the end there, if nobody has any questions. But, today is the start of term 2. The 11th is the Mingle Jingle. We have next Tuesday, the 14th, is the term 1 report cards go out. And on the 24th, the holiday vacation begins. And on January 3rd, we welcome everyone back. And we have a school committee meeting that day. So.
Great. That's it?
That's all I got.
Okay. Ms. Healy?
Good evening, everybody. In your package tonight that you actually have in person is a financial, that was done actually for the originally planned meeting back in November. So we didn't have the update, the financial is as of that date when we were getting ready for that meeting. Just a few things I wanted to bring to your attention. On the top of page 1, let's see, on page 1, on the detail, the very bottom of the page, there was a deficit of $473.68. This just reflects that there was a small difference between the software that we had to purchase that went along with our curriculum, that accompanies the textbooks that we have. And then also, if we go further on down, you'll find, let me see, on page 3, in the middle of the page, is a deficit of $628,000. And this is for some work that was done at the gym. We're replacing the padding that surrounds the stage at the gym. That had become a little hazardous, so we decided to put an investment into that. And then the one thing I do want to mention to you tonight, if you turn to page 2, which is part of our summary, you'll see under special education transportation, there is a deficit of $336,083. Please don't be alarmed. What has happened is that several of our special education providers, several of the companies have closed. So we have had to seek alternate transportation, and that transportation is from smaller companies that tend to charge a larger amount. As you know, there have been driver shortages that's contributed to all of this. We are working every day at making this work better. Since this point in time, that deficit has dropped to $305,000. I know that's still a far way off from where we'd like to be, but please don't be alarmed, because we are looking at that every day. We're making sure that with any of those old contracts that existed, that we're taking care of those. One of the things that the town has allowed us to do in the past is to transfer within our accounts, and we do budget separate lines. We budget an operating line, special education tuition, transportation, out-of-district vocational tuition and transportation. And in many of those other lines, we will have surpluses. We will have a surplus in special education tuition, out-of-district vocational also, we will have a surplus there. So we just want to finalize that. So I wanted to bring it to your attention because it's, since we've had to make that switch, it's been a significant difference. One of the things alone that's happened is the daily rate that we pay to transport all of our students has increased to the amount of it's $195,000 just for the day because of the change in daily rates. So the two companies changing has had a significant impact on us, and many are experiencing the same event. But I wanted to make sure as soon as it came to my attention, wanted to bring it to your attention.
Is that forecast of 195 what you think the full year?
No, I think the 195 is purely just from the daily rate change. So as of right now, it looks like it is closer to 300, but we're still fine-tuning that. We are fine-tuning that. We're confirming everything that we possibly can. I try to remind myself I'm an information sharer.
Don't shoot the messenger.
I'm just the information sharer. I collect, but we will be looking at all options. Nothing's off the table, so we're looking at all options to see what the best remedy for this will be.
I'm wondering if we can apply for like some sort of relief because it's COVID related.
Circuit breaker right now does have an allotment for transportation, so we are receiving more circuit breaker than we had expected based on tuitions purely. So a piece of that circuit breaker that we're receiving is also for transportation.
Okay.
So that's a piece of the puzzle. Yes?
Christine, when superintendent as well, when we do the budget, can we have a line of note that just says what the expected circuit breaker number is that we use? And I know we normally talk about 55, 60, 65, just a note of what that value is that we're looking at.
What the total amount of expected circuit breaker would be?
Yeah.
We can do that. All right. The news gets better.
Can I ask a question? It might be totally obvious, just to understand. How did the daily rate go up? Do we have a contract with the bus company and then?
Well, special education transportation is
never mind, sorry.
Per student route, so it changes all the time depending on placements and then when companies close. So it's a little trickier.
I thought it was the regular buses, which is why I was like, wait.
No, that's going just fine. Well, I should say, that's going as expected.
Okay, so that totally makes sense then.
Yes.
Sorry, thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome.
So,
yeah.
Is there a reduction on the number of students per transport because of COVID? Are they putting less students onto the transport?
Some of that did happen last year, and some of it has continued.
Okay.
But the biggest driver of this is the increase in the rates based on fewer available companies.
$195,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm. That's half of Prop 2.5.
All right, so also in your package there was a question last meeting, and I was not able to be here last meeting, and there were questions about the COVID-19 expenditures that we've made so far. So I've done a spreadsheet that at the top of the page, it's by year, each fiscal year, 20, 21, 22, and where those funds were spent out of. And at the top of the page, the first item that's listed is what came out of the operating budget. When this first happened in March of 2020, we were trying to figure out what we were going to do. So we hadn't spent all that much money because we just didn't know it was going to be happening. But once we ended FY21, once we started FY21 that July, CARES Act started to become available to us. So you'll see that CARES Act funding, we accessed those funds during FY21. And then since then, there have been additional grants that have come our way through DESE, COVID prevention, and then now the ESSER 1, 2, and 3 funds, we will be starting to use those also. So I just wanted to capture on one piece of paper where all those funds, where we access them from and how we've spent them, by category. Any questions on that? If you do, please email. I'll be happy to answer your question.
Thank you for putting this together.
What's that?
Thank you for putting this
Oh,
together.
you're welcome. I kind of like things on one page.
Yeah.
I need the world on one page. And then I have just one more thing to bring up. Summer had sent a question to me earlier today about Chapter 70 funding. And the question was, can you verify the funding per student that our district receives for Chapter 70? So I looked at FY21 because that year is complete. So when I looked at that, the Chapter 70 that was anticipated for FY21 was $3,063,392. Now keep in mind that number is then adjusted for any reimbursement for charter school tuition, and then you also have a charge for any charter school tuition or school choice tuition for students that have gone elsewhere. So that amount came down slightly because of that. But if it, based on the $3 million for the students enrolled at Halifax Elementary School, that ends up being a $4,862.53 per student that was received by the town of Halifax for the students at Halifax Elementary. I'm hopeful that answers the question, because I'm not sure if there was anything more specific other than that, if there was something else they were looking for. But if they still have that question, please let me know, and I'll see what I can do to answer it for you.
Let's see, how do I phrase this? Do we not know like the total Chapter 70 money spent per student until the end of the fiscal year typically, or is that something that's standard?
Well, when the budget's developed, the budget is developed based on, when we're developing our budget, we're basing it on what will it take to sustain the programs that we have. Mm-hmm. The town is looking at the other side, what are their funding sources? Mm-hmm. One of their funding sources is Chapter 70. Mm-hmm. So they're looking at it from a little different point of view from us. So based on what the state determines to be the Chapter 70 allocation and the enrollment, the town starts to receive money for that. And then it's adjusted after the October 1 enrollment information based on the actual number of students. So we did receive in Chapter 70 money $3,063,000, but then there are pluses and minuses that happen after the fact. And then we know what our enrollment is, so that's I wasn't sure if they just need the total amount or the amount per student, so that's why I've given you both numbers.
Thank you for that. And I'll send that information along, and if we...
And that's just Halifax Elementary K through 6.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
That's it for me, unless you have any other questions.
How often does it fluctuate?
Once the state's budget is set, it's set in motion. Chapter 70 is set in motion, unless there are some kind of cuts that happen in the state. But if there are, the money will be consistent, but it does change slightly after the October 1 numbers are released.
No, I meant like year to year. Sorry.
Oh,
clear about that.
It's based on the governor's. So it starts for me with the governor's budget when that comes out in January. And then the budget sometimes isn't passed until we hit the new year. Mm-hmm. So we don't know until that point in time with that. We have to pass our budget and vote our budget before that actually happens most times. So we're acting on good faith that the information that's been presented to us is pretty close to what it's actually going to be.
Mm-hmm. And then the town can plan accordingly. So so the majority of what we spend in our schools lies on the back of the taxpayer residentially.
Yes, because the money from Chapter 70 is about 45% of what it takes to run the schools.
Okay. And that's their number. What the state thinks is 45%. That's not what we actually end up.
Correct. There's what it takes to educate our students. They're providing about 45% of that funding through Chapter 70. Mm-hmm.
But they determine what it takes to educate our students. We don't say.
They come up with a formula of what you should be spending. Mm-hmm. And it's a combination of required spending plus the Chapter 70 funds.
Okay. think it's also valuable information for like the new members of the committee too. Takes a long time to
Oh,
wrap your head
definitely.
around the budget.
Yeah, at the region, we see it a little more clearly because we go from our budget to assessments, whereas as a department of the town, it's set up a little differently because it kind of gets combined with other town funds that are available. So you don't see that, clearly see that as the connection.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you have a question for Ms. Healy?
I have a point of order. I was wondering if it was permissible for the MTA, I'm sorry, the HTA president to be silenced when they were asking to read a statement that was on the agenda. I just want
Okay.
clarification on whether or not that was permissible.
Moving on. Okay, Mr. Lynch, you're next.
You can't, it was a point of order request.
Madam Chair, she's not a member of the committee.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. The next agenda item is curriculum instruction and assessment update. So I just wanted to give an overview of the November 2nd PD Day. Seems like it was a long time ago, but it was just a month ago. So on that day, it's one of our very valuable full day professional development days during the staff year. We have November 2nd and February 28th. So our focus for that day was understanding by design and providing elementary staff from Halifax with time to collaborate with other teachers from across the district. So everybody met that morning over at Kingston Intermediate School, and we met for a brief presentation on the essentials of understanding by design and that curriculum framework. And what it's about is just identifying the standards and essential questions and enduring understandings that students should know and be able to do. And we have a software platform that allows teachers to collaborate both when they're in person and virtually, and that was EduPlanet 21. So we had the presenter from EduPlanet also on hand that day. Thanks to Mr. Beaudry, Mr. DeSantis, Melissa Farrell for presenting to the groups, and for all the teachers for working together during a very busy year to give their best effort and share with their colleagues from around the district. So when we were in the cafeteria during the time when teachers were working together, we saw honest and sincere efforts to try to make progress toward our curriculum goal. And Dr. Prue will talk more about this when she talks about the strategy for district improvement, but this was a key investment in strategic objective number 3, which is having an articulated and standards-aligned curriculum for all students in the district. And we feel like when people have this framework mastered, that we'll be able to make more progress in the years to come towards having this curriculum, which really honors teacher voice and teacher collaboration. We have lots of good programs, but we don't think teachers signed up to implement programs. They signed up to design learning experiences for students, to collaborate together and really put their own print on what they think is best for their students. So it was a busy day, but I think it was a successful day, and we appreciate the efforts of our teachers and administrators in making it happen. We also spent a little bit of time on that day talking about how to make progress toward our social emotional learning goal, which was our strategic objective number 1. So we had a brief presentation about the student survey, which was implemented last week that Mr. Beaudry talked about. We had 88.2% of Halifax students complete that survey. So my basic summary would be, and I know you've heard this before, but during a time when there's been a tremendous disruption to learning, the survey's focus is how do we check in with all students and make sure we see what their strengths are and what their needs might be. So we assessed grit, self-efficacy, growth mindset, self-management, social awareness, emotional regulation, and supportive relationships. And teachers will have an opportunity to see what the strengths and needs of students might be against those scales, they're called, after we do the training and assessing the results. And we're excited to be able to sort of meet students' needs and make sure we've checked in with all the students whose families want them to take the survey. So that's a little bit about the curriculum, instruction, and assessment work that has been going on in the district this past month.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The next agenda item is about the ESSER funding. So just a quick reminder on what the purpose of ESSER funding is. So there have been 3 rounds of ESSER funding, and the goal is, there's 3 main focus areas: unfinished teaching and learning, supporting students' social emotional needs, and operational support in the district. So just if this were a timeline, we'd be about halfway through ESSER 2. So the Halifax allocation for ESSER 2 was about $106,000. So since July, we've been utilizing that grant to support tools like Pear Deck and WeVideo, and also the needs of our special education students, English learners, trying to provide resources to help meet the needs and fill the gaps and extend learning. Our ESSER 3 funding for Halifax has been submitted. I think DESE is working as fast as it can, but we haven't received the confirmation yet on that $225,000, but we expect they wanted to follow up with a couple of items which were submitted 2 or 3 weeks ago. So we should be hearing about that soon, but there's, if it were a timeline, we're about halfway through ESSER 2. So that's a little bit of an update on that funding. And again, with ESSER 2, it's required that we spend the minimum of $10,000 on social emotional learning supports for our students. So I think that's a good tie-in to some of the work that we're doing with the student survey, and we appreciate having access to state and federal funds to make sure our students are getting what they need.
Did you say 10,000 of the ESSER 2 was for SEL?
That's correct.
Okay. Have we exhausted all of the ESSER 1 funds?
We have.
Okay. So I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you can't move on to ESSER 2 until you've exhausted ESSER 1 and so forth?
That's correct.
Okay.
The state would like us to go in order, and
I just didn't know if each of them had a different like allocation for things. Like one was to be for PPE and building support, and 2 is for SEL and so, you know, more educational gap, and then 3 was allocated for something different. So does 3 have different specific? I'm assuming it does.
No, it's a good question. They're very similar in those 3 target areas: academics and instruction, social emotional supports is the second one, and then operations. There's more detail in ESSER 3, and the required spending, I believe, is 20% has to be targeted towards students' social emotional supports and addressing the unfinished teaching and learning. So instead of that dollar amount, it was a percentage.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish.
I was just going to say, I'd be happy to let the committee know when ESSER 3 comes in, and then additional, remember we sent the district-wide survey as required by ESSER 3 to identify what the community would identify as needs. So when that grant is formally approved, I'd be happy to come back and speak more specifically about the funds that have come in and what our plan could be.
Okay, I have a few questions, but I'll let somebody else jump in if somebody wants to ask one before I keep going. No? Okay. ESSER 2, so we have about half of the money left. What do you have planned for it? Do you have it all planned out? Or do you just sort of have a projection, but obviously see needs as you progress and meet them on a more spontaneous basis? Or did you have something specific?
It's a good question, and so far, so for example, we just spent money with Renaissance Learning, which is provides some of our assessment information on for students' needs in reading and math. So that's a good example of things that have come up during the year, as well as I mentioned earlier, the needs of our English learners. So I think our focus is once the results also come in from our SEL survey would be to think about, along with what teachers would identify, when needs are identified or strengths are identified, how can we make more progress towards the student supports? So I think that's part of the plan too, in line with the requirements of the grant, would be to make sure that, you know, we're continuing to move forward with second step and that classrooms have what they need. So right now that's sort of that's where we're at.
So this Renaissance, it's an assessment tool?
Yes.
Is that what you said? Okay. Are we, like you said, things that our teachers and staff in the building and, you know, I'm sure administration identify as needs in the building. So how is that being relayed to you as like higher up in the administration, like what their needs are? Are we also like having conversations with our teachers? Is it going through the building principal? Are we strictly basing it on these academic assessment tools? Is it a culmination of everything? I'm assuming the behaviorist is part of the conversation also, and school psychologist.
Right, so there's an SEL task force comprised of elementary members with our behaviorists and school psychologists, coordinated by Melissa Farrell. There's a secondary one as well. So our teachers have an opportunity with SEL-related components to work with that group. Also, you know, with Melissa's work too, to identify at our elementary leadership team meeting. So we meet every, say once a month with all of the elementary principals and assistant principals, and come up with a coordinated plan for how to move forward. So we did a lot of our planning for the Understanding by Design Day. That was another use of our ESSER2 funding, was some of the funding for the software platform. And part of that grant too also has stipend allocations in it. So as people think about the best way to teach students going forward, curriculum work can also be paid for through that grant. So I think that's a good way to address unfinished teaching and learning when we ask our teachers to think about how do we design learning experiences for what our kids need in 2021, 2022. So I think that's the way our process is working right now. And like I said, if we're halfway through, I think it's been a good time to sort of assess here right at the end of the first trimester what our students' needs are and to make a plan going forward.
So it's actually the perfect segue to where I was going to go next. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, are we going to use any of the ESSER2 funding to provide tutoring to the students or offer extra hours to the teachers that they're working with, if they're looking to do something like that after school, to give those students more time to catch up? Or
So right now we haven't formally made a plan for doing that. There's some talk through a separate grant of running accelerated math work during, potentially during February break. The state asked for a survey on that, so more details haven't come out yet, but that was the same grant that did the Summer Learning Academy last summer. So there may be opportunities for that. We have not formally designed that yet for after-school tutoring.
thank you.
Do you think that's something that we could potentially look into? Because just my thought, and you know, every child is different and every child has their own threshold. And so I think for some kids, the February and April break is a very welcome one. And they might need to take a step away, just even for a mental health break, to being in the building or being, you know, overwhelmed with schoolwork, especially if they're struggling, they might feel overwhelmed already. So I'm just wondering if it might be beneficial to some of our students who may qualify, or, you know, schedules, parents go on vacation, you know, family happens. So for students who don't necessarily have the opportunity, or it may not be the best experience for them to participate in a program like that, although I've heard wonderful things about the one that was conducted over the summer, I do think it might be a great idea to try to potentially, you know, even entertain the idea of having an after-school type program, even if it's sold as like a homework club or extra help for math or something along those lines, where they're already in the school building, so they're already sort of going through the motions of being in their school day. Yes, it makes it a little bit longer, but maybe that's a more palatable experience for some kids as opposed to sacrificing their break during that time. So that was just one thought I had. I do think that it would be something that I would like to see offered to our teachers in-house first before we try to go maybe farming it out to, that's just my opinion, if anybody feels differently. You know, because I know sometimes we can hire like additional staff to come in, but I would, of course, support wanting our students, they already feel comfortable with certain teachers, they already developed a relationship with them, it might be better educational experience for them to continue to work with them. But with that comes a transportation issue. So I'm wondering if that's even feasible, because we're a regional district. We have a late bus, I think, don't we? Did we? We used to, I think, for the elementary school, didn't we?
No.
Never for elementary?
This is the secondary level.
Okay. So I'm guessing that maybe wouldn't even be possible because we're a regional district, and if it was feasible to offer some sort of late bus transportation, do we even have access to, I mean, I guess Christine, you would know better. We just finished a conversation about how we're having a shortage of special ed transportation. Is it even feasible to think that we could have a late bus route, even if it was 1-2 days a week?
I had actually thought about that, because we do run the late buses at the secondary level 3 times a week, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. But it's a much shortened route, though. So for instance, Halifax normally has 10 of the 31 buses that are coming up this way to service secondary students. There are only 2 late buses. So what that means is that a student is dropped off a distance from their home.
Right.
So that's probably the challenge, is that it can't bring every student to their home, is all you have.
Right.
You can't throw buses on it.
Yeah, we can't have our littles walking a mile.
Right, right.
Yeah. Uphill both ways in the snow.
And I understand what you're saying about transportation, that's a different subject, but I don't think that means that's dead in the water. What you were speaking about is having like a homework club or an after-school program, offering it to, you know, teachers that might want to be involved with that. Transportation would be nice, I know. But
Yeah, no, I'm just exploring all options, but I mean, we already have like the after-school sports and STEM, and
Right.
we don't offer transportation for that either. But it was just a thought that maybe it would be. I just think that we need to be, I mean, I do see that there is, you know, an educational gap there. I think everybody sees it. I see it in my own children. I hear it through conversations just having both academically, and after the conversation I had with the school nurse last week, I'm like, wow, those are things I would never think of that she's seeing happen now, like little like things that kids, even unpacking their lunch, they're used to doing by the end of September, they're not, and it's almost Christmas now, and they're not quite there, even with those little developmental milestones, because maybe they're not coming out of preschool because of COVID, or maybe they're not getting, you know, the structure that they did at home because, you know, who knows, there's a million reasons, but there definitely seems to be a lack of support in the building. Not that all of our children's needs aren't necessarily being met, but it, you know, I actually forgot that we used to have a para in every classroom for kindergarten. And then Mr. Beaudry told me last week that we have 2 and they float. And the nurse was saying that it's really been challenging for them because they're not only dealing with, you know, academically trying to catch these kids up, but again, all these social cues that they're missing because for whatever reason, you know, whether it's been isolation, can't see their face, whatever, they're not progressing at the pace that they used to. And now we're having all these studies come out saying exactly that. So I guess that's my long-winded way of making sure that we're not only offering like academic support, but, you know, maybe we need to think about hiring another paraprofessional for the building, or two, if that's even possible. I mean, I just want to make sure we're exploring all of our options to give the littles the support that they need. I talked a lot during the segment. Does anybody else have anything to say?
That makes sense. I mean, everybody responds to human touch and human interaction, and I think that's lacking. So anything like that, these kids can have, definitely be beneficial.
So we had talked earlier about some of the after-school programs not having, I know Youth and Rec is struggling a little bit with some of funding a person to do it. Is that a correct, fair statement? Or is it just finding the body?
I think it's just probably just finding the body. I think he sent something out maybe a week or two ago.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So I
Oh,
think
okay.
we're trying to,
I didn't know if it was a funding issue or if it was we just didn't have the person to run the program issue.
I don't believe it's with funding. I don't think that's the problem. I think
Okay.
it was just kind of getting it going and figuring out the logistics for it. As the people that have done it in the past may not be available this time around. So I think that's what it is. It's probably advertising of who's available, who's willing to do it, what it entails. So I think that just went out recently.
Okay.
Maybe we can get somebody.
Okay. Because I think things like that too offer kids, you know, even if it's not academically based, it's still, you know, time that they're interacting with each other and working as a team. Anything else? I appreciate the update on that. I was curious about it myself, and I know it's a lot of money and there's a lot of regulation that comes along with it, and I just wanted to be sure that, not that I doubt for a second, everyone doesn't have the best interest of their kids at heart, but thank you for running
Sure.
that down. Appreciate it.
High-dose tutoring is on the needs. I think we just have to work together to see if it's practically feasible and we have the staff to staff it, and then the students and families that it would work for. So that's something that we can look into.
That was great. Thanks. Go ahead, Dr. Blue.
Hello. So I have some items for your district update. We met today with Principal Beaudry to discuss his preliminary draft budget. He met with Christine Healy, Ryan Lynch, Murray Grable, and I to discuss the budget proposals and the capital plan, which is it's in good shape and ready for us to work with, and we will continue to meet and discuss and help to prioritize to be ready for a January presentation for the school committee. Related, but not an elementary issue, we've held two tri-town meetings to discuss the Silver Lake capital plan requests, and we will be holding another one on January 10th. So I just wanted everyone to be aware that we will be holding another SAFER meeting with representatives from the Town Administrators, Finance Committee, and Board of Selectmen at that time. In your package, you'll find several student data enrollment type charts, so I'd like to present those to you. The first one is homeschool enrollment. Fiscal year, it should say 2021, 2022. There's a typo there, K through 6. And you'll notice in total, homeschool enrollment in total has gone down for Halifax. It has gone down by 1 student, from 16 students to 15. And again, that typo carried through to the next chart. It should be FY 2021, 2022. Oh no, it's right. It's a span. I apologize. I'm just focused on the fiscal year that we're in. So those charts are correct. The second chart is broken down by town for grades 7 through 12, and so here you can see the homeschool enrollment at the secondary level. In total, across the 4 towns, homeschool has risen by 7 since last year. For Halifax, Kingston, Plimpton student enrollment from 2011 to 2022, Halifax has decreased by 5 students since last year. And if you look at the secondary level, Halifax which is in gold, has decreased by 16 grade 7 through 12. The third chart in your packet is the out-of-district vocational technical students for 2021, 2022. And you can see the different programs broken out across the top, and then the total number enrolled by grade level in each of those programs. So in grade 12, we have 2 students enrolled in programs, South Shore Vocational Tech, 1 in manufacturing engineering, and 1 in computer information. In grade 11, we have students enrolled in South Shore Tech for graphic design and visual communications. In grade 10, we have 2 students at Norfolk Aggie. And in grade 9, we have 2 students at Norfolk Aggie, and then 1 at Bristol Agricultural School. And at the very bottom, you can see the total number of students, from Halifax enrolled in an out-of-district vocational program is 4. But it's also broken down by the other 2 towns as well for your review. The next item is the strategy for district improvement. And so as we talk about closing achievement gaps and improving our schools, we started this journey actually in February of 2020 with our entry plan and our work with teachers, students in the community who were surveyed. There were meetings, there were informal conversations held with students as well to try to solicit input into the point of entry findings. You may recall that in the spring, I presented to the school committee and to staff on 2 separate occasions the major 3 themes that emerged from that data, as well as from the documents that were reviewed, and data that we had collected, whether it be discipline data, MCAS data, school enrollment data, things of that nature, our district curriculum accommodation plan. Those types of documents were also reviewed to help inform the major themes that emerged and were presented. Over the summer this year, we worked with principals, assistant principals, coordinators, and department heads to take those themes and to create a draft strategy for district improvement. This is a 5-year plan. What we saw that bore out in those survey and in those interview was that the core values that we created to get us through the pandemic as kind of a guide before we had created a strategy for district improvement to help inform some of our district decisions, especially with regards to budget and things of that nature, also came to light through that survey and interview data as well. So you'll see in your packet you have a 1-page strategy for district improvement. Across the top you'll see our vision for all students. You'll see the core values listed and a theory of action. A theory of action is an if-then statement. If we do these things, then we would expect to see what our outcomes we would project. Underneath that, you'll see 4 major strategic objectives, and underneath the strategic objectives are strategic initiatives or action steps that would need to be taken in order to achieve those goals. We believe that this is a working document, and even though it's in draft form, even if it were the final copy, we would continue to revisit it as we progress to make sure that we're meeting goals. We have asked all of our principals to align their goals, and we have worked with our principals and our staff to create goals as part of the evaluation process that are tightly aligned with this plan. We recognize that there are lots of wonderful things that we could be doing, but we need to focus and be strategic on those things that will get us to where we need to go and will have the most effect or impact on our student achievement. So in your packet, you'll find a presentation. The first gives you kind of a timeline of where we were in February of 2020, all up to August of 2021 when we first finalized this plan. And we also presented the draft plan to our staff on opening day. The vision for our schools is to create a community where everyone belongs. Staff and students encourage one another to grow, learn, achieve, and dream without limit. There are 4 main objectives. The first focuses on building relationships and communicating effectively to strengthen our sense of community. This is connected, and as part of that, some of our social emotional learning work with regards to what students' needs may be in terms of their sense of connectedness to their school. Our second step program is also another example of that in ways that we will be moving in this direction. The second goal is about high expectations for all students through research-based effective strategies, data-informed instruction, and tiered systems of support. When you talk about the gaps that some people, that we've either talked about through MCAS or that students are experiencing this year because of COVID, we need to make sure that the types of programs, the types of actions that we take are actually proven to be effective if we're going to invest in them. We want to create and implement an aligned and engaging curriculum pre-K through 12. Right now, we have some wonderful programs across our schools, elementary schools, but we don't have an articulated and aligned program or curriculum pre-K through 12 that's aligned with the standards in the way that teachers decide what's most important for students to know and be able to do, to synthesize that into units of study. The textbook or the program is a great tool, but those textbooks and programs are not tightly aligned with the standards or as closely as they could be. And in addition, we want our teachers to focus on what's most important for students to know and be able to do, because the reality is to cover it all, we wouldn't have the depth necessary that students need in order to move forward and to have true understanding or to have transfer skills. So you can cover something, but it doesn't mean that if you're covering everything in those standards, it doesn't mean that I, as a student, I'm going to be able to remember it all, because perhaps in your effort to cover, you haven't used strategies that are particularly effective for deeper understanding. So by backwards design, by planning with the end in mind, it's actually very liberating. It's not an easy process. It's very difficult for teachers to come together, to collaborate, and to come to agreement. And this will be some of the most difficult work that they do and embark on. But it can also be some of the most rewarding because it transforms the way we teach and learn. Having done it as a teacher myself, I can tell you that the lessons that I planned with planning with the end in mind, and by planning with my colleagues, the strength of my lessons improved as a result of that. Collaboration can be messy, but it can also bring about some of our greatest results. So we're excited about that. But we don't pretend that this is easy work, and this is going to take 5 years. And even after that 5 years, this is something that curriculum needs to be revisited and revised. As you do something in a lesson or a class, you find things that work, things that didn't work. The beauty of this is that teachers have a platform now that they can coordinate and collaborate and discuss and revisit. And that will also continue and help us to revisit what's working and what's not in our classrooms. The fourth objective is to improve structures and processes to focus on learning efficiency and outcomes. So whether it be capital planning, how those items are presented, and making sure that we have a form that helps us be better prepared when we present those items to the town, or it's school schedules, or it's how we're going to be using the ESSER grant. We also have a tech team that we started last year, and one of the goals of this tech team will be to create a 5-year plan. The tech team not only is going to create a vision and goals and objectives, but it's going to be made up of not only our technology experts, but of our teachers, our educators, making sure that those two groups are working together to define what we need and what will be useful at the classroom level. Because it's critical that teachers and educators have a voice in those types of decisions. And it's also critical that our technology experts help to inform them as to what would work best, why, and why not. So we've pulled together groups of people to help inform that regional plan. So for this year, because this is a lot, we wanted to highlight some things that will be taking place this year to help reach our goal. This is a foundational year. We're putting some things in place. We are going to expand the social emotional task force to include pre-K through 12. We actually started the social emotional learning task force a few years ago, prior to adopting second step, and that was informed by teachers and counselors, and I think we even had principals as part of that committee, and eventually we adopted second step, which is not only social emotional, but it's an approved anti-bullying curriculum by the state of Massachusetts. We have incorporated and included the middle and high school as also because we want to make sure that effort is continuing along with the students so that they have a common language and understanding of the expectations in our schools. We are going to continue to build upon improving relationship skills and identifying resources to foster positive relationship building. For example, when Principal Beaudry and I visit on a regular basis, and we visit classrooms together. And what we have started doing is looking at effective research-based strategies for relationship building. We go into classrooms, we try to see if of those effective strategies, which strategies we see on that list as evidence, and we talk about other strategies that may not be on that list, and then we talk about potential exemplars that the teachers could share with one another. So that's just one example of the ways in which we're looking at these effective strategies and thinking about what's already taking place in our classrooms, celebrating that, and then encouraging teacher leaders to share, whether it be a faculty meeting or through a memo. We have a pre-K through 12 survey that has or will be going out from Panorama. We're expanding second step to the middle school by the end of this year. And we're promoting district-wide common language and practices. With strategic objective number 2, we want to make sure that we are evaluating and improving inclusive practices at all grade levels. This means ensuring that inclusion ratios for students, for example, who have an IEP, are in a classroom where that ratio allows them to be with peers and not in a what would be defined as a substantially separate classroom, to give them the least restrictive environment possible. We recognize that some students require a substantially separate learning environment, but that should not be the expectation. That should be the exception, not the rule. That should be a very small set of students in our population that require that kind of sub-separate programming. In fact, I should note that the reality is that when we pull students out of class, we tend to find that the gap grows. Research has shown this. Students are best served by being in their classroom with their classroom teacher. And again, it's helping teachers with training, with support, in terms of what practices will help them to address the needs of the students in front of them, which is also a very difficult job to do. But to the greatest extent that we can keep students in the classroom and push in as opposed to pull out, the students tend to be better served. It's not to say that there aren't examples where that isn't the case, but statistically, children are best served in the classroom with their classroom teacher. We're going to focus our professional development plan on highly effective instructional strategies to meet the learning needs of all students. And Assistant Superintendent Lynch is working with the Professional Development Committee. He is also chairing the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Working Group, and they are working on action steps based on the 2021 staff survey to design DEI-focused professional development for February of this year, and that would be for teachers. I talked a little bit already about strategic objective number 3. I can't emphasize how important this objective is. So we're going to provide and continue to provide professional development and training as needed, but also time for teachers to collaborate is probably the biggest need that we can identify. So principals are also looking at schedules and structures to see to what extent that can be possible. But at this time, our 2 professional development days and curriculum working days during vacations are some of the greatest opportunities that we have for teachers from across our 3 elementary schools and our 6 schools total can get together to work and collaborate. We have asked our principals to encourage and recommend that teachers adopt 1 unit development goal for teams during the 2021-22 school year, and we have seen that many of our teachers who are starting new plans have in fact taken on that goal. And we recognize the amount of collaborative work that this is going to take over the next 5 years. So I have to emphasize that goal number 2 and goal number 3 are about an idea that every student has the right to access grade level curriculum. We don't take different tests with MCAS. There is one test that all students must meet in order to earn their competency determination. And so our classes need to have and hold and provide grade level expectations for our students. And that's also what acceleration is about. When you ask the question what the state has planned, they expect us this year to teach at grade level standards, but to work with students to create more in-depth opportunities that would cover a variety of standards, as opposed to covering discrete standards one at a time. So the more relevant, engaging, problem-centered, the more opportunity students have to accelerate their learning and to meet those objectives. So in each Understanding by Design lesson, there is a performance-based task, and eventually, as these units are created, we're going to provide supports necessary, but also capitalize on the expertise of our teachers who will work together to create engaging, relevant, and authentic opportunities for students to engage with the materials. We're looking to increase connection between educational programming and the budget and the technology and the capital campaign processes. So this year, you'll see when we present our budget, and Principal Beaudry has done a great job already in his draft of connecting his budgetary request to this plan. The request through ESSER, I would also argue, we should try to the best of our ability connect to this plan. That's how we move the plan forward. If the plan is unfunded, if these items can't be met, then we're less likely to achieve our goals. So we have made a commitment to begin working towards these things, and we're hoping to articulate and explain to you as we make these requests how they connect to the improvement plan, so that you also see that connection as to why these particular things may be important to helping us get and achieve our goals. This is the last school committee that I have presented to. All of the other school committees have already received this, so we're a little bit later because our meeting was canceled, but it wasn't intentionally. Once all the school committees have had a chance to review, we'll certainly consider any additional feedback that you may want us to consider. We have started to move ahead, as I've said, with some of these steps, but again, it is a draft and it's a working document, and we would expect not only feedback from you, but also feedback from our teachers and from our principals as we move forward as to what is working and what may need to take priority as a result of what we're discovering as we move through this plan. And we can review and adjust as needed. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I know this was a lot, so it's a lot to absorb, but before I move on to the next item, if there's any questions about the strategy for district improvement.
Are you thinking?
Yeah. With the change in enrollment across the district and the makeup of the students, that seems to, I guess, be different for the town of Halifax when you look at the overall number of students and programs, especially when Marie's information came up last week. When you look at those numbers, is there a way to set a strategic strategic goal so that those students that need some support to get brought back into not needing support at the earlier stage can be targeted?
So I don't want to oversimplify it, but there are many things that we can do to try to address a student's needs sooner rather than later. One of the things that we do is through data teams and support teams. We look at students who might be struggling in a particular area. Oftentimes our data may be related to English and math, but the reality is that a student can also be brought to the attention of a support team because maybe they're struggling behaviorally or emotionally, for example. Or perhaps they may not be doing well because of their grades, but it could be connected to something not academic in nature, right? So that's why we have support teams in our schools. A support team can write a district curriculum accommodation plan for a student that may be struggling, that they feel they want to track a limited set of potential interventions and see how those work and then revisit. And so if you notice in the plan, one of the things is that we want our schools to be regularly utilizing the district curriculum accommodation plan. We want high-functioning data teams, and if that requires additional professional development, that's something that we would, provide and support through the Professional Development Council, making sure that that's a priority. We also want to utilize a lot of the strategies that we use to accommodate or support students, not all. But a lot of the strategies that we use are just good teaching practices. So the more effective research-based strategies that we use on a regular basis in our classrooms, the more all students will benefit and thrive. So many of our teachers have taken the SEI endorsement class for English language learners, but many of us recognized as a result of that all students would benefit from those strategies. There isn't a strategy there that any student in the class might not benefit from. And students have different needs. And so providing students with multiple ways of presenting a particular problem or issue, or ways that we communicate the information in multiple platforms, or giving students voice and choice as to how they're going to demonstrate their proficiency, all of those things would be beneficial in terms of elevating the achievement of all. I think talking about programming or keeping programs in district, I think that's something that Marie talked about in her presentation, and I know that she is considering a program at the high school level because she believes we have currently met a number of students that would make that possible. And then I don't think I think what's easy to say but hard to do, and this may seem simplistic, but growth mindset. The child's own belief in their ability to persevere. To what extent do we allow redos and retakes? Is the goal proficiency? If the goal is proficiency, what would the parameters be to allow a child to redo and retake so that they can to meet that particular goal? To what extent is our mistakes okay? To what extent do we ourselves allow ourselves to make mistakes? What kind of language do we use with our own children? Do we say good luck, or do we believe that they're going to do well because they've studied? I myself use the expression good luck. But the reality is how well you do on a test is about to what extent you're prepared for the material that's going to be on that test. And do students feel comfortable asking for additional support? Those types of things are critical. Our belief in students' ability is a key factor for children in general. So it's an age-old, and it's also research-based. There were studies done by Harvard University that if I were to go into Mr. Ruisi's class and say, Mr. Ruisi, this year you have all of the gifted and talented students. Even though they were randomly selected and put into his class, these studies have been done. Mr. Ruisi's class would outperform in these studies because of the perception that he was given a group of students who are gifted and talented. Now, that doesn't explain away all of the difficulties that a child could have, but it's been duplicated and replicated time and time again. It's also a cultural reality that we ourselves acknowledge, whether it be through Pygmalion or My Fair Lady. Our expectations, our belief in our children, and the children's belief in their ability to persevere have a profound impact on whether or not they will persevere and have the tenacity and grit to do what needs to be done to succeed. We should work hard, we should struggle. If things don't come quickly or easily to us, we shouldn't believe that we're not good at something. And yet, many of us, if we will even say, I'm not good at that. So to what extent do we teach our children to say, I'm not good at that yet? So that they learn that sense of agency or ability to get better at something. So that's a lot of educational philosophy, but I think your question is far too complicated for a quick answer.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Mine definitely will be.
Okay.
And I'm trying to hang on to bits and pieces.
Yep.
It is a lot of information from, I think it was objective too. But you mentioned IEP and what studies showed numbers that the student performs better being in the classroom with the teacher, right?
In general, generally speaking,
We're talking
yes.
generally speaking, so.
Pushing a student in,
Well, okay, pushing a student, I'm not saying just IEP, but pushing that student with different abilities into that teacher's class. The teacher's got a class of 25, 30 kids, so, and students.
Yeah.
So now, how much of the teacher's time will be needed with that one student who needs to be in that classroom? I also heard you mention not just IEP, and there's different reasons for IEP, I understand, but you said emotional and behavioral struggles. Is that student fall under that umbrella, does better in the classroom as a whole, in general? Because there's even more time that the teacher...
So part of that is classroom management. Part of that might be a behavioral plan that would be worked out by a team. But generally speaking, students will rise to the level of expectation and tend to do better with peers who are engaged in classroom learning experiences. So we don't necessarily want to pull children away because they're misbehaving. We want to work with the child's family to figure out what the issue may be and try to address that. But by pulling them out of the classroom.
Pulling them where? I'm not saying pulling them out of the classroom to sit in the corner, but aren't there different programs for schools, for instance, a CAMP program or basic skills program, things where they are in a classroom with other students with similar abilities? I guess the question I'm trying to get at is, this is a blanket.
Sure.
You said in general, and I just hate to see the teacher some 5 years from now saying, well, this particular student who has different abilities is taking a lot of that teacher's time, but now that we have these new goals, that the kid, the child, the student has to be in that classroom, and they could probably prosper in a different program within that school. Does that go away, whether it be?
I think we're bordering on not providing the least restrictive environment for that child rather than deal with the behavioral issue in the classroom. So just because a student acts out doesn't mean that they should be placed in a substantially separate classroom with other students who may be acting out. And a child who acts out today may not have a behavioral issue a month from now. So I think it would depend upon the severity of the behavior. I think there are some students who require a substantially separate setting because of the nature of the needs. But no, I wouldn't recommend taking your students who might be experiencing behavioral issues and putting them in a separate classroom. I think that would be detrimental to students in general. As a high school teacher, I taught a heterogeneous class for several years. And the nature of the class was such that there were no prerequisites, there were just standards and students. And the expectation was that all students would meet those standards. So, in my experience, I think a lot of behavioral issues can be handled with sound, effective classroom management. Not all, but it can go a long way.
In that sound effective classroom management, I'm imagining through the strategic plan, there would be supports for the teachers, for instance, a para in every classroom. I mean,
Not necessarily.
okay. So they,
I mean, I'm not saying that wouldn't be helpful or wonderful, but it depends on the nature of the needs of the child. I wouldn't say that every classroom who has a child with an IEP in that classroom requires paraprofessional or a co-teaching support. There are any number of reasons why a child could be on an IEP that doesn't necessitate an additional support person. Some students do require that additional support, but not as a blanket statement, not every IEP. There are students with IEPs who go on to take AP courses and go on to institutions of higher learning and excel. And so, again, not every child on an IEP requires additional personnel to support them.
Any more questions on this topic before Dr. Prue proceeds? I don't have them.
Okay, on to discussion of posting vaccination rates and possible votes. So before we enter into that discussion, let me give you some information. The number of student tests given for Test-ins Day as of December 6th is 22. Of those 22 students tested in Test-ins Day, all of them were negative. There is no evidence of school transmission at this time. On our websites, some of our school districts have discussed in school committee and have asked us to post the vaccination rate of staff and students. Only recently have numbers for students become available, and those numbers are starting to come in for some of our elementary schools. This is on the agenda as a possible discussion item in case the school committee wanted to have their vaccination rates posted on the website as well.
Okay, so in full transparency, Jill, we had a meeting with the chairs of each of the committees, and Jill had floated this to all of the chairs, and each of us responded accordingly. My response was no, and I thought about it for a minute, and then I know that I can be a very passionate person on some of these issues, so I thought it was appropriate to bring it back to the committee and have us decide as a whole, instead of me being the end-all be-all decision on that. So that's why I had it put on the agenda for all of you to have your input, because mine was no.
The vaccination rates are already, they're already public. I mean, so it's just a matter, like I noticed, like looking on our, that we were the only school that doesn't have it listed.
Right, that's because I said no.
So, I mean, I figure since it's public information, why not make it accessible just for transparency, I guess? I don't know. I mean, it is, available. I mean, I looked it up myself today before the meeting, just because I was curious. Because I can see, you know, and it breaks it down by age, so it's not hard to tell what age. I mean, obviously not every child age group 5 to 11 is necessarily in our schools, but I mean, I think it's helpful information personally, although it is public, so if you really want to know, you can find it out.
That was kind of my take on it. Was I didn't think it was the appropriate place for it to be on a school website. It is public information. If people want access to it, they can go get access to it through the state. I didn't think it was appropriate for it to be on the school website. But if somebody feels differently about it, that's...
I think maybe a link to where they could find it, if we're not going to put it there, just because people have been asking what the vaccination rate is. I've been getting inquiries.
Well, it's easy to access on mass.gov. I mean, anybody can do it from a phone.
I mean, leave a link. I think it's, I mean, I don't have a very passionate feeling one way or another on this particular topic.
I guess
So,
I
mean,
just
if it was
wonder
posted, I don't
why.
see
We don't
not.
post vaccination rates for flu. We don't post it for measles. We don't post it for chickenpox. We just don't. So why are we going to get involved in going down this road of posting school vaccination rates? If we do one, why are we not doing them all? Like, I just don't think it's the appropriate place for it. That's just my opinion.
What would you think? Okay, well,
And I don't think it makes a difference. I don't think it matters.
well, to somebody who's looking for it, to facilitate that information, make it easier, the link.
But why would you go to the school website?
Wouldn't you go to mass.gov to find out that information?
I don't use the computer very much at all.
Yeah.
Well, then there you go.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for me, looking at, I mean, I have kids at the middle and high school, so for me wanting to know what the rates are, it's an easy way to see it without having to delve through a lot of data. I mean, I had to manipulate the Excel spreadsheet to kind of get it down to Halifax and then to try to figure out, like, I know, and the only reason I feel like it's relevant is because of the 80% benchmark.
Right, but we as a committee have not had a conversation as to whether or not, so do you understand that the 80% benchmark doesn't mean that we can just take the masks off?
Yes,
The
I
district,
do.
okay, so the district has to apply for a waiver.
Right.
So we haven't even had a conversation about whether or not we want to do that.
Okay.
So to me, it just seemed that, like, again, this is just my opinion, which is why I wanted to bring it back to the committee, because I know I have strong opinions on this topic. I just didn't think it was the appropriate place for it. And I don't think I don't know, like, what difference does it make?
I think it makes a difference because sometimes it might be part of people's research. If they're considering getting a vaccine for their child and think, oh, a lot of people are comfortable with this, maybe I should talk to my doctor, or...
Right,
I
talk
just
to your
feel
doctor.
I feel like it's information we can provide that's public anyway and just make it more accessible. Because if it doesn't make a difference, then why not just put it up there?
Because in my opinion, I don't think it's the appropriate role of the school.
Okay.
That's just my opinion. But if we don't have any motion, we can move on to test and stay. So I put test and stay on the agenda because a lot of parents were reaching out confused. It's like a very complicated and complex. I know myself, I probably had multiple conversations with the school nurse and Dr. Prue and different members of the committee and the Board of Health trying to figure out what the heck this puzzle meant. Okay, so I thought it was a good review. I know that we did discuss it in our August meeting, and we did send out information regarding test and stay. And we did send up the nurse leader, Nurse Beck, sent a reminder out through Parent Square, which I thought was fantastic, which included all these flow charts, which is great. And so I just wanted to quickly kind of review it and just have this available so people could find it. Because I don't think people understand really the parameters or need a refresher on them.
Yes. So, in your packet, you will find the memo that was sent out by the Department of Education. It was dated August 13th, which also provided you with access to the flow charts for the different scenarios. But to remind everyone, test and stay allows students to remain in school and not require them to quarantine as long as they are asymptomatic. If they're a close contact of a school close contact, they can remain in school and do not have to quarantine as long as they are asymptomatic. They wear masks in school at all times other than when eating or drinking. They take a rapid antigen test on school each day and receive a negative result, and conduct active monitoring for symptoms through day 14 and self-isolate at home if symptoms develop. That's how test and stay works. Close contacts are defined by, are identified through the local Board of Health in cooperation with our school nurses. And our school nurses will ask questions of both student, family, and sometimes teachers. Sometimes they ask for seating charts, for example, things of that nature. Close contacts exempt from testing and quarantine. These are close contacts who do not need to participate in test and stay. They do not need to quarantine. An individual who was exposed to COVID-19 positive individual in the classroom while both individuals were masked so long as they were spaced 3 feet apart. Individuals on buses. An individual who was previously diagnosed with COVID-19 and then becomes a close contact of someone with COVID-19 is exempt if the exposure occurred within 90 days of the onset of their own illness and they are recovered and remain without COVID symptoms.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? Just
Yes.
to clarify, because I think that's where some of the confusion, at least the parents that I've spoke to, is who's a close contact, who's not a close contact, who qualifies for test and stay. And after putting the pieces together with the school nurse, and we asked a lot of questions, and I could not find my notebook that I wrote all of this down in, so if you could jump in if I say something wrong or I miss something. So a few of the questions were, how do I know if my child qualifies for test and stay? So the school nurse at Halifax Elementary, Nurse Burns, was very, what's the word I'm looking for? She's doing an inordinate amount of work to try to make sure that she is charting out and contacting every parent whose child is at risk for being a close contact. So if you do not hear and get a phone call from her about the test and stay program, then your child most likely does not qualify for it. So any child within 3 feet of a positive case gets notified that they are qualified for test and stay. Because I had some parents contact me, well, I want my kid enrolled and how do I do it? You'll get a call from the school nurse, so take a breath and wait for that to happen. She has been very, very diligent about that. I know she's done like tons and tons of work. Another question was, what if my son is awaiting a COVID-19 test result? Is my daughter then required to stay home from school? The answer is no. They are not a close contact. They are not, in terms of this. And to your point earlier, just to clarify that it's only a close contact in the school building that makes it so you can enroll in the test and stay program. I know that a lot of our kids spend a lot of time together outside of school, or maybe they're in an after-school program or something where they've been exposed to COVID. And, yes, it seems a little bit ridiculous that they can't, because they had the exposure outside of school, that they can't participate in the program. But you can imagine that if DESE did not put these guidelines on this program, that we would have 600 tests potentially going out the door every week and do not have the funding or the capacity to handle that. What else was one of the major questions people had?
Dairy does, she notifies the close contacts that are 6 feet as well.
Oh, okay.
Because they
But
don't have-
only within 3 feet do you qualify for test and
Yes.
stay? Okay. That's right. I do remember that.
Siblings, test and stay. I think it was maybe just more, we talked about the procedure for test and stay, that they come in the morning.
That's right.
And parents are allowed to come in with them and they do it right before school starts.
Yep, so she did mention that, yes, a parent can join the student in the school while they're administering the test. They take the test right there. The parent does not have to be with the child for test and stay, but they're welcome to be. The parent does not have to drive the child to school on the day that they are participating in test and stay. The child is permitted to take the bus. So, Yeah, COVID doesn't live on the bus. So that was another question that there was a miscommunication about, was whether or not your child could still take public transportation if they're part of the Test and Stay program, and the answer is yes, they may.
And it could have been when we started it, we were working with the fire department, and they were doing them in the gym in the morning, so the parents would stay in their car, and then, you know, the fire department would help us out, but now that our numbers are manageable, and Derry's taken on that, so she's been fantastic. She's been kind of working through it.
The other question we had too was what constitutes an outbreak? Because there were some conversations about, there have been a couple of classrooms where there's been multiple children who have tested positive. And I asked her, like, with things like influenza, like what do you consider an outbreak? And it's 20% of the student body is out sick, positive for influenza or any other virus, is what constitutes an outbreak. So there was like a little bit of panic going on with, you know, a couple of kids in the same classroom, but again, it seems like you had mentioned that all of our test and stay
negative
participants are negative, so that's great.
And no evidence of classroom spread, because that's another reason why the Board of Health and the Department of Health may recommend, let's say, for example, closing a classroom or a grade level, for example, is if they felt that they had evidence of some sort of in-school spread. It's one of many factors that they would look at before either closing a school or closing a class or closing a classroom or grade level.
Okay, and I guess my own question, we are, have the support in place to conduct this program till the end of the school year? Or are we sort of weighing that on the resources from the state in terms of the actual tests?
Test and Stay is, to our knowledge, will be here for the entire school year. To what extent we need it for the entire school year, hopefully would be very little, but again, we are anticipating increases. We had an increase after Halloween. We will most likely see an increase in a week or so from Thanksgiving, and we expect another increase after the winter holidays. So we would imagine that Test and Stay will probably become more regularly used in the following weeks because of those anticipated increases. We have support from the state program, CIC, Health something. Do you remember the name of that, the company that they're?
Yeah, the subcontractor?
Yes,
I don't.
sorry.
Not top of my head, sorry.
So we have additional support from the state, which we didn't have at the very beginning of the school year, but we have found that as the need has increased in other communities, that they have been helpful with the Test and Stay. The contact tracing is time consuming and does require coordination with the local Board of Health.
And yeah, and also the Test and Stay program is optional, so if you do not participate in Test and Stay, you have to, I'm reading it now just so I don't say the wrong thing, quarantine for 7 days, return on day 8 with a negative test, and you are asymptomatic. Is that what it says on page 2?
I believe you got them all.
And then with no test, you have to be asymptomatic and quarantined for 10 days. You can return on day 11.
I believe that's true also. I have to look at the flow chart.
Because there are some parents who don't want to test their children at all, also. Just want to make sure I'm not giving anybody any bad information.
Yeah, it's on page 2.
Page 2, or Protocol A.
Okay.
And Protocol
B, if you're
B as well.
asymptomatic close
Yep,
contact.
they're
Okay.
written there.
Okay. Yes?
Ready to go to executive session?
Yes. If nobody has any more questions about Test and Stay, because I know there were a lot of them like 2 weeks ago, so I'm just making sure we covered everything.
All right, I would move to go into executive session.
May I stop you for one moment? Can I read the dates to remember before we close? November 24th is an early release day, K through 6. The release is at noon. There's no lunch provided that day. November 25th and 26th, wait, I'm like, wait a minute. What day is it? Okay, this was printed prior to the moving of our meeting. Okay, Thanksgiving's over, summer, get it together. All right, the 24th is Christmas Eve, and that's when the holiday break begins. January 3rd, we all go back to school. January 3rd is also the day of our next school committee meeting in Halifax. And January 17th, we have off for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Now,
Okay, I would move to go to executive session, according to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 38, subsection A, subsection 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining for contract negotiation with the Halifax Teachers Union.
Not to
return to open session, but to adjourn from executive session.
I'll second.
thank you. Okay, all those in favor? Lauren?
Yes.
Gordon?
Yes.
Myself is a yes. Jen?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.